Good day, everybody. It is day 74 of the war between Israel and Hamas. I'm Jim Williams, and our cover story today is about the United Nations, Israel's relationship with the United Nations. The United Nations today, at some point, is very likely, through the Security Council, to issue an edict saying that Israel must cease all operations in the war, full stop, in exchange for the return of the 129 prisoners. But there's a difference between a ceasefire and a pause, okay? We'll get to that in the, as we go through today's cover story. We'll also update you on what Secretary of Defense General Austin, who was in Israel yesterday, will talk about what was accomplished at that time, what continues to need to be accomplished, and we'll also talk about the hope of the United States and Qatar to put together his humanitarian the humanitarian breaks, where there would be a pause in exchange for more hostages, as well as humanitarian aid to get into Gaza. Okay, but that's a pause and a ceasefire, and we'll get into that right after we have our morning briefing coming this time from our friend Tal Heinrich, who is in Tel Aviv, and this is the briefing to the press, not unlike what you would see with Joe Biden's press secretary, or any major person who is going to address the public and give you basically all the information, the latest information on what they know and what is going on in Israel. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Tal Heinrich.
All right, we can begin. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tal Heinrich, a spokesperson for the Israeli Prime Minister's office. This is day 74 of the October 7th war. We start today with the latest updated figures. Hamas's army of terror continues to launch rockets from civilian centers in Gaza towards civilian centers in Israel. That is their double war crime. To date, they have fired over 12,500 rockets, more than 2,000 of which have misfired, most of which landed in the Gaza Strip. Just under an hour ago, my colleagues and I were forced to run to a bomb shelter here in Tel Aviv during a massive attempted missile strike on the greater Tel Aviv area. The IDF has notified the families of the deaths of 4 more Israeli soldiers, thus bringing our military casualty count to 463. We send our heartfelt condolences to the families, the friends, the communities of those brave soldiers. Our hostage count has not changed since yesterday and remains 129. We continue to pursue all avenues to secure their release. Hamas recently engaged in psychological warfare by releasing a video of these elderly hostages. They are clearly malnourished and mistreated by their captors. We demand the Red Cross apply pressure on Hamas and its supporters to secure access to the hostages and start doing their job. We are also grateful to the media outlets which did not air this psychological warfare video. We continue learning of the long-term trauma suffered by children who were abducted by Hamas and about the outright child abuse they suffered. The children's psychiatrists are horrified by their findings, reporting that these crimes against children prompt them to, quote, rewrite the textbook. Our children were stolen from their homes and used as human shields. We have a moral imperative to destroy Hamas and to promise our children that the terrorists will never, ever threaten them again. We move on to an operational update. The IDF continues to confront terror groups on multiple fronts, from Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria. In Gaza, IDF troops identified and removed an explosive device planted in a medical clinic in Shajaiya, near a school. They also destroyed yet another terror tunnel near the coastline. Our troops saw terrorists fleeing from the destroyed tunnel and subsequently ordered an airstrike to eliminate them. The IDF and the Shin Bet have completed yet another targeted strike, this one eliminating Subhi Firwana, who was involved in transferring tens of millions of dollars to Hamas's military operations. In the north, the IDF continues to exchange fire with Hezbollah and Hamas terror cells. Just yesterday, Israel received an encouraging visit from U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. He reiterated that the United States' support for Israel is, quote, unshakable, and that the U.S. is not imposing a timeline on our vital military campaign. This war will end with the end of Hamas. We are glad to see the U.S. spearhead Operation Prosperity Guardian, a multinational coalition which will secure the free flow of commerce through the Bab el-Mandeb Passage. The Houthi terror pirates are an urgent threat to international peace, security, and global trade, and that demands a global response. We welcome the decision by 10 nations to take serious steps to confront the Houthis, and we are grateful to the United States for leading this operation. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has begun discussing the next stage of our operations in Gaza. Upon achieving our military objectives, we will be in a position to gradually allow local civilian populations to return home. This is more likely to occur first in Gaza's north before it occurs in Gaza's south, though these plans are, of course, contingent on the success of our military campaign. And finally, we turn our attention to the UN Security Council and its impending vote regarding our war against Hamas. In Israel, we will continue to abide by the highest standards of international laws of armed conflict. We call on the UN Security Council to similarly act with moral clarity and to demand the immediate and unconditional surrender of Hamas rather than intervening to secure impunity for the October 7th monsters. And let me be clear, all of us want this war to end, but none of us can allow it to end while Hamas is in power. They are an existential genocidal threat to the people of Israel, and they explicitly threaten to carry out more and more massacres like the one on October 7th. The sooner we eliminate Hamas, the sooner we revitalize hope for Israelis and Palestinians alike. I will now take your questions.
The first question comes from David Isaac of JNS. On the 10-nation international force to counter the Houthis in the Red Sea, why doesn't it include Israel?
Thank you for this question. Well, as we said, this is a global problem. The Houthis are a global problem, and it requires a global response. Of course, we are acting against this threat as it reaches our borders, and we will do whatever it takes to be involved in that task force. It's important to mention here that the Houthis are an Iranian proxy. Pressure should also be applied on Iran, of course, in that aspect. So it's an Iranian proxy, but it's not enough to exert pressure just on the proxy. The pressure should also, again, I'm repeating, be applied massively on Iran. We know who funds the Houthis. It's the same terrorist regime that funds Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah in Lebanon.
The next question comes from Gwen Ackerman. Is there a time frame for allowing those in the South to return home, and will housing be made available? What kind of housing?
Well, this is a premature question to discuss right now. As I just said in the briefing, all of these day after plans and so forth are contingent upon the success of our ground operation to eliminate the Hamas terrorist regime. As Yoav Gallant, the Israeli defense minister, said, things have to happen in order. Once we move on and continue to operate against Hamas, we want to see this phase coming in which we will distinguish between different parts in the Gaza Strip, and populations will be able to return, likely first to the northern parts of the Gaza Strip earlier than in the south. But again, we have to see how things progress. The IDF on the ground, our forces, as you know, are making significant achievements against these terrorists. We continue to eliminate many terrorists and a lot of the Hamas terror infrastructure, but this takes time. There's still a lot of terror infrastructure that we have to eliminate.
The next question is from Jim Williams of Zenger International News. Tal, over the past 3 days, the U.S. has warned Iran that continuing attacks on ships in the Red Sea or rockets fired on Israel by their proxies in the region would be met with a swift and decisive action against Iran. Does the Israeli government support the U.S. warning against Iran?
Well, of course, we welcome every swift response to terrorism, and Iran is definitely behind all most of the trouble in the region. Arming these proxies, providing the financial resources to these proxies, as we know. So it is very important that not only Israel takes this very decisive action and decisive standpoint against it, it's very important that the United States does so, and other partners around the world. And we are very grateful for President Biden and his global moral leadership in that aspect. It sends the right message. You know, terrorists around the world are watching what's happening between Israel and Hamas, and they're taking notes. For this exact reason, it is also very important that we end this war with the end of Hamas, because that would send the right message to every other Iranian proxy and terrorist troublemaker around the globe.
Next question is from Alistar Bunkal from Sky News. The IDF has confirmed that an incident took place in the vicinity of the Holy Family Church in Gaza when two women, a mother and her daughter, were shot dead. Do you agree the killing of civilians undermines the legitimacy of your military operations? And what comments do you have on these specific killings?
Can you just repeat the first sentence?
Sure. The IDF has confirmed that an incident took place in the vicinity of the Holy Family Church in Gaza when two women and a mother and her daughter were shot dead.
Okay, so we do not target civilians. Full stop here. The IDF only targets terrorist and terror infrastructure. We don't want to see civilians being caught in the crossfire, and we're doing the utmost efforts to guarantee that this doesn't happen, while Hamas is doing exactly the opposite. They want to see civilian suffering and civilian casualties. It serves their goals. They openly say it, that they want to sacrifice the civilian population of the Gaza Strip to achieve their very sick goal of obliterating the Jewish state. Now, regarding that specific incident, if you look at the map, the church that you are talking about, the Catholic Church, is located in the Rimal neighborhood. According to the latest debrief that I have received from the IDF on Saturday, there wasn't fighting in that specific area. We're still investigating this incident, definitely investigating it. And the IDF have been in touch with representatives of that church on Saturday, and during the conversation, no reports of casualties or a hit nearby the church was raised. Now, it's important to mention that our forces regard any such claims in utmost seriousness because we're talking about holy places here. And again, we don't target civilians no matter their religion, of course. But as you know, Christians are a minority group in the Middle East, and this is why we take such claims very, very seriously. Now, I know that there was another church in the Shajaiya neighborhood, which is a very, very complex battle zone, maybe one of the most complex battle zones in the Gaza Strip, not only now, also in 2014, if you have been paying attention. And over there, our forces had to respond to terrorist fire in the vicinity of a different church. That is what I am aware of. Another thing I think that is important to remember here when reporting such claims is that our nation, our military, and our leadership, we tell the truth and we're for transparency, even when it's the most inconvenient thing for us to acknowledge, as happened just a few days ago in the case of the 3 Israeli hostages who were mistakenly identified by our forces as a threat and were shot at. A very, very tragic incident. So when we investigate, we conduct a thorough inquiry about incidents on the ground, and we have findings, we announce them. We take responsibility. Regarding the church incident, right now, this is not the case. We are still investigating. All right. I have another question from the chat. So somebody asked, what is the expected hike in import prices from the disruption of economic shipping to Israel? I'll just, once again, this is a global problem. It's not only Israel's problem. We're not the only ones suffering from the Houthi attacks. These are massive, it's a massive threat to free shipping in the high seas. And again, we're very pleased to see that our best friends, the Americans, are addressing it with the seriousness that they've taken it, with this 10-nation task force that they're leading to tackle this challenge. Let me see if oh, and I have one more question about Lebanon. Please provide a figure for the number of kilometers that Israel wants to see Hezbollah distance from the Lebanon border. Please provide a figure for the number of kilometers Israel wants to see Hezbollah distance from the Lebanon border. Okay, so regarding the Lebanese border, we want to see the UN Security Council Resolution 1701 being implemented. That is the resolution that ended the Second Lebanon War in the year 2006. So, you know, Hezbollah is not supposed to maintain any military presence south of the Litani River, which is located some 30 kilometers, that's 18 miles north of the Israel-Lebanon border. The Lebanese army was supposed to enforce the authority of the Lebanese government over South Lebanon. And the Lebanese government was supposed to get rid of Hezbollah's presence in that area and other terror groups. And it was supposed to be supported by UNIFIL, the UN forces, which clearly failed their mission there. And trust me, it's not something that Israelis forgot about, an international guarantee that doesn't hold water. So obviously we don't want to see a full-fledged war on our northern border, but as our defense minister said, if Hezbollah wants to go up a level, we'll go up 5. And all right, that concludes our daily briefing for today.
Thanks to Tal. And now let's take a look at what's going on. Let's begin. As I said before, our focus today is what's up with the UN. Now, as I said before, and you heard from Tal, the Security Council is getting together. They're drafting a resolution demanding that Israel do a complete ceasefire with Hamas, and Hamas return the 129 hostages that they have. Here's the problem with a couple of things here. Here's where we go deep dive. Get your pencils out. It's time for class, okay? There are 10 members on the, 14 members, I should say, on the United Nations Security Council. There are 5 permanent members, and that would be China, France, Russia, the United States, the United Kingdom, are all on there. Okay, so they are the members who are permanent members of. I'm sorry, I left out France as well. Of the group. Albania, Brazil, Ecuador, Gabon, Ghana, Japan, Malta, Mozambique, Switzerland, and the UAE are now serving their 2-year terms on the UN Security Council. Now, it should be noted that any member of the council can veto any action regardless of what the vote is. Let's say the vote is 14-1, okay, of the 15 members. The one vote stops the rest of it, okay? So the motion, any motion that has in any way, shape, or form been involved in sanctions or calling for ceasefires or any of that has been traditionally and consistently stopped by the United Nations because of the U.S. The United States has stopped every possible penalty to the State of Israel initiated by the Security Council. And again, let's go back and talk about the five, the five permanent members. China, Russia are on there. Who exactly is helping out Iran? It would be China and Russia, okay? So if you think that the United Nations in any way, shape, or form is without politics, you would be, unfortunately, wrong. It is, in many ways, all about politics. The U.S. and Russia have seen eye to eye on certain things. The United States and China have seen eye to eye on certain things. So there have been issues where sanctions have been, levied, and UN has penalized nations. All right, but we have a couple things in play here. Let's go with the first one. The United Nations is treating this as if it is a war. We're calling it a war. It is, two sides battling each other. It's a war, right? Except for there's a small difference. If, and this is when the UN was established, a traditional war was a war against a country versus a country, okay? Each side wore uniforms. Each side played by some set of rules. This isn't the case, and this has not been the case for a number of years, all the way going back to 2001. The attack on the United States, just like the attack on Israel, was not carried out by a country. It was carried out by a terrorist organization, okay? By the very definition of the word terror and terrorist, you're not fighting an organized army that plays by the rules. Literally, on October 7th, every one of the key tenets in the Geneva Convention laws, which dictate how you handle a war and what is a war crime, were committed on the 7th of October by Hamas. I mean, pardon me for laughing, but it's laughable that you would think that, let's say, Israel has to do this because their partners in crime, in this war, Hamas, they're not going. There's nothing they're going to do that's going to change the rules. They don't play by the rules. They never have played by the rules. So under what planet do you think that they're going to play by the rules? So let's put that in a little box off to the side. As I said before, China and Russia benefit greatly because of Iran for there to be a problem in the Middle East, and specifically a problem tying up Israel. It helps them. So anything brought forth from the Security Council, by all means, take it with a grain of salt, because it's just not something that you can concern yourself with. Now, these people of moral high ground, taking the moral high ground here, at the United Nations, are doing so without, and this is, I think, a very important point, the United Nations has yet to condemn the terrorist attack on Israel on October 7th. As the time of this taping, it's December the 19th. A lot of time, 74 days to be exact, have gone by since the terrorist attack on October 7th on Israel. The United Nations, forget the Security Council, we're talking about the body, has yet to condemn what Hamas did on October 7th. So, is the UN effective? Let's move forward to the humanitarian aid. Tal, in her daily briefing, explained that humanitarian aid is being pushed into Gaza as quickly as trucks can get there. Yesterday, there were over 200 trucks going through the two border crossings into Gaza. Is it enough? No. But Israel has said, we'll take as many trucks in as quickly as the United Nations and their supporting groups can distribute the humanitarian aid. Now, call me skeptical. The UN seems to be slow rolling out this aid in a way to paint Israel as a bad guy here. Look, there's no real, let's put it this way. I feel terrible, and the world should feel terrible about what's being done in Gaza when so many innocent lives have been lost. Just like I'm sure everybody in Israel is upset when there's a loss of life there. Okay, so I think we all want to see some sort of peace, some sort of stability, some sort of not looking over your shoulder because the next attack is going to be, a rough one, and people are going to get killed, and terrorist organizations are allowed to fester. Okay, but you gotta say, it's a terrorist organization when they literally disregard almost every tenet in the rules of war, specifically when you talk about the Geneva Convention. Okay? So, I strongly recommend, if you want to do a little homework, check into the rules of the Geneva Convention, place it up against what happened on October 7th, and you'll realize that the concept of treating one country who has a legitimate army versus a terrorist organization which works out of a country. Well, actually, in Gaza, they work out of a zone. Perhaps a territory would be a better way of putting it. It's not a country, okay? And we'll talk about that in just a minute, about the two-stage solution. But at the end of the day, applying UN-type rules to a terrorist organization is, if it were not so sad, it would be laughable. Okay? It would be laughable. The fact that they're not supplying the aid as quickly as they can, for whatever the reason, shows a gross incompetence on their part. I am certainly not excusing the number of lives, I should say, being lost in Gaza. That's terrible. It's horrific, horrific situation. Just as the loss of life in Israel is a terrible situation. But pardon me if I'm not interested in hearing a lecture from the United Nations when in their inability to acknowledge that Hamas is a terrorist organization. In my mind, they are complicit with Hamas in not doing so. Now, let's talk about a couple brief updates. Yesterday, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin came to Israel with a pretty interesting brief, okay? His goal, and remember that Israel is a sovereign state. The United States can't tell them to do anything that they don't want to do. But they can advise. A little background on Secretary Austin. I should say General Austin. General Austin, prior to becoming the Defense Secretary, was the commander of CENTCOM. CENTCOM, located at MacDill Air Force Base, Tampa, Florida. Very familiar with it. It is the nerve center for all things Middle East from the United States standpoint. They monitor everything that goes on there. It was CENTCOM that has been involved in every single war going back to the original Desert Storm under George Herbert Walker Bush, all the way through the battles that the U.S. fought in Fallujah, as well as in Afghanistan and throughout the Middle East. So they have history here. They have what the United States has done right in that region and what they've done wrong in that region. It's been there, and they can share those plans and share that information with the Israeli Defense Forces, and obviously with Prime Minister Netanyahu and his entire war team. Okay, so that was one. Number two, and again, as Tal stated, Secretary Austin was quick to say and quick to point out that the United States is supporting Israel in every possible way. Okay? whether it be munitions, whether it be money, whether it be whatever they need, they get. Okay? You can have disagreements on how people are doing strategy regarding that battle plans. You can have strategy on what happens after, which is the two-state solution, which clearly is something that Prime Minister Netanyahu has always been against. And, at this point in time, his power base, is indeed in lockstep with him on wanting to not have, a two-state solution. That's not how the Israeli public feels, and it's not how the world feels. And for there to be peace in the Middle East, there desperately needs to have a two-state solution. And there are ways to do that where the Palestinians and the Jews can live side by side, working together. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen a month from now. But it has to be an aspirational goal, and there has to be a framework put in place that makes it a doable thing. And right now, the United States and the Qataris are working diligently for two things. One, get the hostages back with a humanitarian pause, much like we saw for a week back in November. But you have to figure out what's going to happen long term in the region. The United States has been extremely active in getting the UAE, Qatar, and the Saudis, all of whom control the largest part of the wealth in that region. They need to be part of the rebuild of Gaza once this war is over. I take a deep breath here because what I'm about to say is that there will be a day, again, I certainly have no idea when it would be, at the end of the war, when Benjamin Netanyahu will not be in charge any longer. There will be a push by the international community, specifically Israel's largest allies, the United States, France, the Great Britain, that this is the way to go. Okay, we need to get you to this point. And same thing, by the way, with the Palestinians. Okay, it's right now very raw. Okay, you're not going to get a peace deal done in the middle of a war. That doesn't happen. Okay, what does happen is you have a short-term goal of how to end the war, a little intermediate goal to how to bring the two sides together, and then the long-term goal, which is how to, establish a two-state solution. Those, at the moment, are conversations going on. They're theoretical conversations. They're esoteric in some regards, and they're even aspirational, I guess would be a better way of putting it too. These are the goals. Can they meet them? If there is going to be peace in the Middle East, they have to meet them. Okay? Those are not goals that you can overlook and say you're going to have peace. You're not. Finally, the last piece of the UN aspect, and to an extent what we're talking about here, you cannot think that Hamas is I mean, is it an army? Yeah, it's a radicalized army. You can't think that you're going to kill Hamas. Hamas is a philosophical concept where they want to kill as many Jews and Americans, and probably French as well, maybe some Britons. And they band together to accomplish that goal. So you're not defeating Hamas if you bomb Gaza into oblivion. As a matter of fact, you're likely to help promote Palestinians to want to be part of Hamas because they're mad at what they've seen. That they've seen disaster, they've seen people die, they've seen their homes destroyed. Living under occupation from their standpoint. That's not healthy, and you're feeding the beast at this point. The United States learned that the hard way in Afghanistan. They learned it the hard way in Iran, Iraq. I'm sorry, Iran, not Iraq. Let me get it straight. Iraq, not Iran. So yeah, this is complex. Nobody ever said it was easy, but which is why it hasn't happened. There's been periods of peace, but the Saudis, the UAE, and Yemen have been working with Israel over the past decade. There just hasn't been a specific doctrine that they've signed or that they've worked with. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to see, as I said before, a short-term plan, an intermediate plan, and then the long-term aspirational goal of having a two-state system in place that may very well lead to a long-term peace in the Middle East. That's something that's going to take a long time, and we'll keep obviously hoping and keeping you up to date as things move along. Okay, at the moment, as we said, there is meetings going on in Qatar between the U.S. and Qatar to see if they can, because Qatar has access to what's going on with Hamas as best that anybody could. So they're going to work with them to try to come to a hostage for pause situation, as I said, which we saw in November. Okay, so that's enough on that aspect at this point in time. So the battle plan situation check that off. Austin said, "Look, we stand lockstep with Israel. Israel, in the same hand, gave some sort of solid commitment to General Austin that they would look into a more strategic plan of how to get rid of the Hamas leaders versus the consistent bombing and constant working neighborhood through the entire region of Gaza. It should be noted the other part of this, and it's not for nothing, this old Southern saying, and that is that this is also about how Israel works on the global stage. The pressure being put on by France, the U.S., Great Britain, is not because they don't want to see Israel succeed. It's that they want to be able to have, at the end of this, a coalition of countries that want to work to bring about Middle East peace and feel as if that can be a goal. So that's the other and final element. I'll talk about that. Red Sea battles. Okay, as Tal mentioned, and we have mentioned, pardon me for a moment, It's what we like to call the second segment, SIP. We're talking about the Red Sea battles. All right, what's going on there? The United States has two carriers in that region. The Israel isn't involved at the moment. They're fighting their war with Hamas, and so don't want to stretch them too thin, which is why the U.S. is stepping in and saying, look, this is an international situation because there's international shipping going in and out of the Red Sea constantly. So what we're seeing here is Iranian proxies who are firing missiles in that direction, as well as their drones and a number of other things that in some way I believe that that what Iran would love to have is to have the United States, quote unquote, join the war. Okay, because that would be Israel and the United States could then be hated throughout the entire region. The United States can deal with Iran without starting a war. Okay, there's a lot of things, both tactically from a standpoint of militarily, meaning they can bomb, a number of different facilities. Perhaps they would take out, some oil plants in some places where Iran has these abilities to make money. They could destroy those things. It doesn't have to necessarily be taking out military installations. So there's that. The other thing which they could do is obviously through cyber. They could shut the country down from that aspect, because they're just not as sophisticated as what's going on in the United States, or for that matter, Israel and France and a number of other European countries, where they have a much more sophisticated plan of how cyber works, and certainly cyber attacks. So that was spoken about yesterday. Confirmed with CENTCOM that they are continuing to monitor and continuing to talk with their allies in in Israel. So Tel Aviv and Tampa are now in lock from a standpoint of they're in constant sharing of information, be it satellite information. Wrote a story which you can find through Zenger, through a number of different outlets. One quickly brought to mind is Inside the Nation. You've got it. You could read it there, about how CENTCOM is sharing information with the Israeli government and the IDF so that they can help figure out the strategy. And as I said, Lloyd Austin understands it, and so we've moved on to the Red Sea battles. The attempt there is pretty much the United States telling Iran, stop it. Okay? You're going to regret it if you don't. So, the two-state solution, already mentioned that. For that to work, being honest, Benjamin Netanyahu will not be there. Once this war's over, again, I've watched enough Israeli politics to know nothing is easy. But I don't foresee, when you look at the lapse of security under Netanyahu's time as prime minister, his basic pandering to the right in Israel has not ended well for them, and it won't end well. Netanyahu, in that regard, he will eventually be replaced. The key thing now is who is going to replace him, who can replace him, who has some sort of concept of a two-state solution, which we hope, as I said earlier, is going to be approached as in stages and as something that we all want to see. So that's what we got for today. I thank you all for joining us. It's always it's always interesting to figure out what's going on here. And each day we do everything we can to make it so that you all get the latest information from Israel. Now, a couple of business items here that we'd love you to do, if you could. And that is, as that little crawl comes across, subscribe, please. Hit the bell. And that way you're going to get our reports, which are daily, but if something happens that warrants it, we come back on as quick as possible and give you that information. Please leave comments, okay? We'll answer them. If you have questions you want me to ask to the State Department here in the United States, General Austin, the White House, or to talk to Tal or Alon or the folks in Israel, leave the message. If you have a comment, supporting what's going on, or conversely, you're objecting to it. This is a space where you should feel free to open up and give us your feedback, okay? And we will answer any of these comments as thoughtfully and as politely as we possibly can, okay? So by all means, feel free to leave a comment. And as I said, Nicole will answer them. Also, as I said before, if you could just, ring the bell, subscribe, and like us, that would be nice too. All right, if you can do that, thank goodness, greatly appreciate. Okay, so let's talk for a second, real quick, about the podcast, which you can get on Apple, Amazon, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Audible, and wherever you get your podcasts. So if you can't see us on YouTube, or if for some reason you prefer to listen to a podcast, we have them. This is year 4 of the Politically Incorrect podcast. This is issue number 4 of the video version of the Politically Incorrect podcast. So it's 4 years and running, well over just about almost 300 of them now that we've done. We will at some point in time transition into the 2024 election, which was one of the things that we were fortunately, and I say fortunately because of all the work that was done by the team here, to be recognized as understanding and being well ahead of what happened in 2016, what happened in 2018, what happened in 2020, what happened in 2022. We've been pretty spot on when it goes to how are these elections going to be adjudicated and debated and run, and so we've had some success there. You will see us back again in 2024. Okay, all right, everybody. That's it for a Tuesday, day 74 of the war between Israel and Hamas. We will be back tomorrow on day 75. And we'll be talking to you about that. By that time, we'll know what's going on with the UN resolution. We'll know if perhaps something has been crafted that could be, the hostage and pause humanitarian deal. So lots of stuff that could happen. We'll have it all for you tomorrow, including the daily briefing. So thanks for joining us. We shall see you tomorrow. So keep an eye out for us. All right? Take care, everybody. We will see you on Wednesday.